Okay, this is a video about biomass, but it's really a video. Sorry, I shouldn't have even said that. It's a video about timing issues a little bit. They're relatively simple timing issues, but I'm going to introduce how to, if you have a operating model on a month by month basis all the way to the end of its life, and then you want a financing part of the model on a semi-annual basis here. I hope that this goes to semi-annual after the COD. Just that issue seems to come up a little bit more, perhaps because there's some seasonality in different projects and things like that. So that's it. And then it's also a video about poop. And I got in trouble for this, okay? But this is a video about a biomass project. Now I've looked at more and more biomass projects these days, and 58% seems to always come up. Hmm. And when I make some kind of assumptions, I'll start with some timing assumptions, and every single time you make a biomass project, you need to learn about converting, in this case, because it's a US project, about cows pooping. And we take their pee and poop and put it into a digester, but we've got to figure out of this, the pee doesn't have any value, so we just have to figure out how much poop you have. This is how much they produce. A cow produces, you might not even be used to pounds, but 275 pounds per day of waste. Huh. And then we have to convert that. So we go to, if we take this model to a farmer and say, okay, we can figure out what kind of cows you have and about how much they poop. We convert that to BTUs or to square feet, and then we figure out how big of a mound of poop you have to cover up with a digester, and you leave it in this digester for about 22 days, and then you get a flow rate. You figure out, well, how much comes out of this thing, how much is spewing out. You put it in, it comes out, you put it in, it comes out, and there's always kind of a storage aspect to this. And then you take this stuff, which is you can call biogas, and you can go through the chemistry or something like that. And this biogas is, we can figure out how much each cow produces of this biogas by just making a few conversions. And we have to make a capital investment in this digester, and then we put it we put it into an upgrader, and the upgrader makes it into methane, or basically natural gas, and so the methane doesn't just spew out into the atmosphere. Isn't that good? Because that's a really bad greenhouse gas. Instead, we clump it into the digester, cover it up, put it into the upgrader, and then send it to the natural gas. And then you get a few incentives. You get a bunch of incentives. So that's our project. And just let me pause for a second. Okay, I was looking for some nice, simple examples on the internet and how you cancel out. I guess I'll just have to do a few of those. So, of course, if you have let's see. We have the something like how much waste you have in pounds per day, and then we convert it to feet. Of course, this is feet divided by pounds times pounds per day. We can get the number of the amount of feet, and then sometimes you have to divide it, and sometimes you have to multiply it. And every time I've had a uh, uh, I've had a biomass, I end up doing something like that. Okay, so that's it. And then we have some operating assumptions. And what happens in these apparently is that some of the revenues you don't get to collect for a heck of a long time. So we have some revenues, and this is called the low carbon fuel standard credit. It gives you a lot of extra revenues, so that you have to present it, and it's a volatile price. It's not a fixed price. You present it, and you don't get paid for 12 months. Okay, so what happens is we make a little model here, and let me see. I'm not going to put the model right up on the internet right now, but I just want to show you some things. So you always should start with how much you produce, like anything else. How many cows do we have? How much do they produce? What kind of revenues do we get? And then we put our capital expenditures, which I put, they're a little bit tricky. We should figure out if we're really good, and we're going to present this to a farmer. We say the more cows you have, the bigger lagoon or the bigger digester you have to have, and then how, depending on how much I'll just poop you put through it, then you get a different size of a to the upgrader. Good. And then you put your S curve in, and then I messed around with the S curves just a little bit, and I waste way too much time on this because I didn't know what they actually were. But I tried to do this and said you can put this alpha and beta, and it's a smaller is a wider number. So if we put this in, we get a wider distribution. If we put this in, we get a kind of compressed distribution, and you can put in different skewness. And so I said smaller is less skewness. It'll look like a more like a normal distribution. If you put 5, you get high skewness. Well, that was the standard deviation. Smaller is less 10. You'll get more put over there. And I guess if you put 1, well, 1 is too little, isn't it? 3, 4, 5. We're not. I'm not getting skewness on the other way, but I'd have to adjust the other one. Okay, good. There's our S curve for our 2 kind of equipment, and because of the working capital, when we work through the revenues, and now we really, really, really need to understand what's a fixed cost and a variable cost. There'll be nothing that varies with the price, but a lot of the electricity and the chemicals you need and all that other stuff you need, a lot of that will be variable. Now, for now, we haven't kind of worked through that. But when we go to the working capital, the big working capital is this one. We have 12. And then one of the things I really need to do very quickly, very soon, is to figure out is this offset function, which I really don't like very much anyway, but I want to go backwards 12 months. So if we record the revenues, we want to go back 12 months. Now, you could do this on a semi-annual basis and go back 2 semi-annual periods and all that. And the revenues are mainly not inflating, so it's kind of all boring. But we can then get our working capital, and we have to put a big investment in working capital up front. Now, we could deal with this fact that the investment in working capital caused these cash flows to be negative in the first 12 months in various different ways. The way we could either have some uh, basically negative sculpting, where you actually, it's almost like funding. You keep funding the debt, and you recognize that you're going to have to fund the debt. You could try putting a big grace period, but that wouldn't work. The grace period wouldn't work because you have negative cash flows here. You could do what we're going to do, which is count an initial working capital and fund the initial working capital in a cash account, take that cash account out, use the withdrawals from the cash account to offset the working capital. Oh, you could also, and then include that in the debt service coverage ratio. Okay, those are a few of the things we could do. We could also just set up a separate debt facility and just say it's just a separate loan. There are all sorts of things you can do. I don't know. Maybe that last one's kind of the best. Okay, so here, when we put our financing assumptions in, when we put the financing assumptions in, we put the we put the. I've just changed my mind about something, by the way. You know, I get yelled at for making videos. I almost have to sneak away to make my videos. But we're going to make this, the financing part of our model, 6 month, semi-annual, 6 months. And we made our operating part of the model, perhaps legitimately, perhaps not. Maybe they poop more in different seasons. I don't see why. Maybe not. But well, I did it at least for working capital purposes. Now, once you do that, you know you're going to use a sum if. And if you use a sum if, we have got to, here is let's just walk through the timing. First, how much? 225. Type in 1, Alt-EIS, 225. If you're on a German computer and you have the macros open, you can put Alt-T. Shoot. Just a minute. Alt S 225. Why S? I thought I did it with T. This does exactly the same thing. Let's just do that. In fact, Alt S 225, it even puts the 1 in for you. That's just a little macro. Now I want to find a macro that, because of this very wonderful man I met named Sasha, I want to find a macro, and I want to make sure I should do this in every single video. Here are my rules. My rules, let's see if it works. If you press F2, I put months in year. If you press F2, you should see how every single calculation is made. The lookup, you should understand that means I have to look in the assumptions in row 13. So we're allowed to use the lookup. That's kind of bad that I went down instead of up. But basically, every single formula should be totally transparent. That's rule number 1. Not at fast bullshit. No, I'm not going to criticize fast because Kenny's so nice, or smart, or whatever these rules are. That's the rule, because I can tell you if if I'm auditing somebody else's model and I want to understand where things come from and how this thing works, basically, I have to be able to say, yeah, I kind of understand how it works. That I press that. Now, the second rule I have is you can put this up here. I hate it when you do that, but whatever. I'm not going to win that fight. And of course, it's colored differently. And when you do this, you press Control square bracket to find it. Function F5, enter to go back. Now, if you have a UK keyboard, an English, French keyboard, this thing right here can be really hard to find. So that's my rule. Now, what I'm going to do is try to make a macro that does the same thing. And I tried to make one simplistically. That didn't work. It's going to take a little tiny more time. So I hope I can introduce that soon. That's the basic rule. Now, if we go down, the first thing when we put these things that we get, I put a pre-COD flag. Just this one is less than or equal to this. So that's every time, every single time, and then you put a little thing around it and multiply it by 1. Okay, whoops, not by 11, by 1. Okay, and then it, does the conditional formatting. And then you have something, and this is in our a monthly period, we have one for pre-COD, one for post-COD. Maybe you could put something like this, pre and post COD, or if you really wanted to, you could put a little thing on the top of this, or you could insert some other columns, however you want to do it, or you do it like this horrible other stuff and add lines and all that crap. Okay, and then you go to your very starting period. Again, we just find that by controlling right bracket, and that's the date we start, a development start, and then we take it and we add one, and then we make a E date, and you always subtract one to get the end of the month, and then you just copy this all the way across. Okay, nothing big. And then we say, okay, well, this time we had an operating contract and a physical life and a development period, and we can put and statements and just kind of copy that down. But then here, let's just show you what you want with the timing. What you really want is this COD date. Just focus. What I would do is just focus on this COD date, and you want 6 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then when you go to the next one, right after this, you want this date, and you want 6 of them. 3, 4, 5, 6. And this is, once you have that, when you have this, then you can just use a sum if. And when you use a sum if, you just use this number 14. So the number 14 is that date. And you did everything the same, except we have a 6 here instead of we have a 6 instead of a 1. So that means when we go to the post COD period, everything else up there is the same, except it's 6. And once it's 6, there's our COD date, and then of course you're using the eDate function and incrementing by 6 and subtracting 1, blah, 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 blah. Okay, that's all okay. And now we have our 6-month period, and if we use our sum if, I think you hopefully will trust me that will add up all the revenues, and then we can add up all the construction expenditures, but remember that's still monthly. The construction period is still monthly, so we can do all our financing. And you remember why we do this. Please don't listen to some crappy other crap. The reason you do this is because you assume the cash flows occur at the end of the period, and it's all driven by the timing of the interest. So if you're going to go and do this and then put average interest and all that, that's kind of defeating the purpose. You're basically going to say, okay, we're getting the money from a bank, and then we're paying the people at the end of the month. And then we accumulate IDC, interest during construction, I don't care, over the construction period. And then, but once we get to the repayment period, we repay it at the end of the period. You repay after the first period, you start repaying it. And of course, we have some working capital we have to deal with. Okay, now I'm going to go back. So the question is, how do we then, all we need to do is get that date. The first thing is to understand you want this date here to be semi-annual. And I probably in the past have been giving you some rules, and every time I seem to do it, I do it differently. But let's get here. What you want at the end here, I'll just go to the end. I just used an E date. And you can, up here, this March, you can go to that April here and then go back one. And then you can go to the next one, May, and go back two. E date, and the E date works with a minus. And then a -3 and a -4, and then you start over with 0. Now, how do you do that? How do you do that? You first understand that you just make a little accumulation. You make a little accumulation, and when you make an accumulation, you can just put, well, if we take the prior number, this prior number, if that prior number is 6, we want to start over and go to 1. But if it's not 6, we just want to add 1. You do that all the time. That should be kind of basic. Okay? And then, but you know, when I do this accumulation from 1 to 6, from 1 to 6, if you could get this 1 to 6 working, then up here to get these negative numbers, you'll put I should have done a 1 minus that number, but whatever. I did a minus of that plus 1 because it took a minute. So I do that's minus 2 plus 1, minus 3 plus 1, minus 4 plus 1, and then you use the E date and it all works. Okay, so the big trick, let's just review the big trick. The big trick is simply to make a counter 1 to 6, 1 to 6, 1 to 6. And if this would be very illegal for our auditor friends, so we better put this in and we can make it even more flexible, can't we? So we could put this in and we can just put a lock that in like that. Okay, Shift Control R, okay. And so the way this reads is if it's, now it's harder to read. If it equals, take the last number, if it equals 6, go back to 1, otherwise go back to 1. Now you notice I did one other thing. I made a kind of reverse of the pre-COD flag. I could have used the naught instead, but I made a reverse of that pre-COD flag. And I only did this calculation when it was post-COD because that's when we're converting it. And then this one is always the same. And I put a little if statement. If it's the pre-COD, that's this one, just take the date. Otherwise, take the E date. Okay? Now, I made this video because, well, why did I make this video? Who knows? Because I had to do something. But I want, it's a simpler video, okay? And maybe I'm getting kind of off track, and some people I think just just would like to go back to some of these little tricks. Now, once we, by the way, there were a couple of other little things to do here. I had some development cost, and this development cost, we're going to say this is the development cost up here, and it's again associated with some timing issues. So we spent it over 12 months or something like that, and this was the total amount. And then what I say is push this over here, and then make a little flag, another flag for when it's you're going to put this development a flag at the COD date. I left it as true false instead of 10. Maybe it's good to be consistent here. Who knows? Okay, and then you know, it doesn't color it right away, so you'd have to do this kind of stuff. Watch me screw up with the 10 or something like that. Okay, okay, come on, and then so the true false kind of colors automatically, and this one doesn't. You can see exactly when it has, and if you're really, you know, precise, you could get a sum. And with that, my friend Ashray, he made this into a macro. That's pretty good. That's a pretty good idea. Then where are we? Then we get this, the, then I put another flag in for just, if it's 12 months, I took 12 months. I should have maybe, the auditors would yell at you for this 12. Who gives a crap about them? And then you can have the flag for the working capital, which is we want to put 2 periods, 1 year, because we had this lag. We want to get those 2 periods and then sum them up and figure out how much we want to put in. And we want to get that working capital financed right at the COD. Okay, and we're going to put that in here. Now, I haven't finished up all the IDC and all that. I'm going to put the IDC and all that. I'm not going to make an umpteenth video on the parallel model. But I am going to put it on the website and show you if you add something like this working capital to your analysis, something like this, And if you just want to very, very quickly do this, you can do it I argue that you can do it more quickly. I've got 3 different debt issues. This is going to be all put in. Look, I haven't finished putting all the totals on. And we could go through and compute, sum them and do a copy paste and blah, 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 blah. But I'm going to show you how without wasting your time with another video. You'll look at my website to get that. And I've tried to restructure all that to make it much more clear because I'm getting really ready to introduce it and show you how fast it is. And that's enough of that video because I'm about to get in trouble for making too many videos and getting yelled at for that.